So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and their challenges and what's really driving them forwards. And this morning I'm delighted to have with us Sarah Derbyshire, who's the CEO at Orchestras Live. So firstly, Sarah, thank you for spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Orchestras Live to the audience and what you do and how you do it, that'd be wonderful.
Lovely. Well, it's great to be here, Chris, and thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I'm the Chief Executive of Orchestras Live. I've been with the company since 2016, and we've been through quite a bit of change over that period of time. We are an organisation that believes orchestras are for everyone, and we're a national producer. We work across England, and we develop projects where music and creativity can thrive within local communities. So we are all about giving people the power in the places where they live and work to shape their own engagement with orchestras and culture generally. Collaboration is absolutely at the heart of everything that we do. We're not a sole producer on any of our programs. We always work with partners. They're always locally based, and we work with them to understand what their needs and aspirations are, so that the kinds of projects that we develop, the orchestras we put them in touch with, the innovations that we bring into presentation and creative production are all relevant to those communities. And we've been running actually for nearly 60 years.
Wow.
Which is quite something, actually. And I guess that kind of gives us the sense that we must be doing something right. But at the same time, we're not complacent. We never sit back and say there's only one way of doing things. In fact, my whole team is very much focused on creativity and how we can do things differently, how we can keep orchestras alive and meaningful for people wherever they live and work.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Well, if we start just a little bit about your background, Sarah, in general, how you got into business and why this particular one that you joined, I'd be keen to know.
Yeah. Well, I've had a fairly long career, so I won't go, well, right at the beginning. I mean, this is not what I expected to be doing. This is not what I planned to do. And I think what's interesting for me, actually, is that music's always been a really important part of my life since I was a young child. But I didn't actually think that I'd have a career in music. And part of that is around a kind of assumption that to have a career in music, you've got to be a performer. And whilst I love performing, and I always loved performing, I didn't want to be on stage. I didn't want to have that kind of role. And when I was growing up, the idea that you could do anything else in music didn't seem to present itself. So I wanted to go into publishing. And that's where I started off. But my very first job actually was with a music publisher. And I guess that kind of kept me in touch with the things that I loved about my involvement in music as a young person. And it was actually, I stayed in publishing for a bit, worked in London, but moved back up north and got into arts administration. And so that was when I really reconnected with the possibility of music. And I began to understand, there's all the stuff that goes on behind performances. There's all the promotion, there's all the sales, there's all the negotiations over fees, there's the creative side about programming, all of that kind of stuff. So I began to get an idea about what it takes to make the whole music sector operate. And from that point on, that's where I stayed. I guess there was one really key job for me, which I think has set the course of, in a way, the kind of direction that I bring to the organizations where I've worked. And that was working for an organization called Live Music Now. That was set up by a violinist called Yehudi Menuhin.
Oh, yes.
And he absolutely believed in the power of music to change people's lives. And that partly came from his own experience in the Second World War and playing in hospitals, but also going to the camps and performing and playing with and for people there. And so the work that I did there put me right at the heart of what is one's experience of music as a participant, not necessarily always as a performer, but as an audience member, a listener. And we worked with all kinds of different groups and communities. We worked a lot with children, children with additional needs, children with physical disabilities, a lot with older people, lots of work in residential homes. And it just, you just saw people blossom and flourish as they came into contact with music.
Yep.
And the other side of that organization was about the growth of young musicians and how they develop those kinds of skills. And I guess that's one of the things that attracted me when I saw this job at Orchestras Live, because by that point, I really had come to see how important this work is for the musicians themselves. There's a weird thing that happens, particularly for orchestral players, where after years and years of study, you reach the pinnacle.
Yes. You
get that job that you've been hoping for in an orchestra, and suddenly somebody else is telling you what to do. And it's a really odd thing in a creative industry.
Yes.
And this sort of work, this engagement work, actually gives musicians something back, because they are in control again.
Yep.
So Orchestras Live's always been about change, and I could see here was a role where we could drive change, positive change, by actually involving people in the experience. So it's not a kind of going along and telling people what to do. It's creating things where people begin to see for themselves what the possibilities and their own potential can be. And that's really what attracted me to the role.
Wow. And you mentioned it wasn't what you saw yourself doing when you were young. What were your plans?
I wanted to be an editor in a publishing house.
Right. Yeah.
Because I studied English at university, and books were the other thing, almost an equal thing alongside music. Reading and literature and all of that. And yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And actually, the publishing industry has changed so much since that time. I think I've got. I think I'm in a good place for me.
Great. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And sort of, as you say, since 2015, and as you've seen things change, what would you say some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome?
Well, I work in a sector that has a kind of mixed economy. So we are, we generate income, we earn income. My particular organization, it's the orchestras we work with who sell tickets and box office and have that as part of their income. But we do generate income, and we are businesses in that respect. But we're also we do receive funding and subsidy.
Right. Yeah.
And for Orchestras Live in particular, because we work with a lot of local authorities, and the diminishing funds that sit within local authorities, and the kind of reduction in their own ability to choose where to spend those funds, because they have so little now that isn't absolutely required for statutory obligations. Those kinds of shifts in public funding, and to an extent the shifts in public perception, have been big challenges for our sector. So I think that's one big thing for my particular organization. I think for music and the kind of non-commercial side of music, there have been so many things that we have all had to kind of get to grips with. I mean, the range of opportunities that people have for their spare time is huge now. You know, the whole streaming, digital,
Yes.
all the ways that you access culture
Yep.
have changed enormously.
Yes.
People tend to think of orchestras as being very, very traditional. You've got 60 men and women dressed in, you know, black and white sitting on a stage. And it's our job at Orchestras Live to say, no, we're more than that. We are that, but there's all of these other things as well that actually you can connect with. But that is a challenge because there's so much else coming in from every side that can attract people, and that's where they want to spend their time. And then, of course, you know, COVID. Nobody going anywhere. Everybody having to sit 2 meters apart. People couldn't perform together. People couldn't sing together. So that's been a massive disruptor, let's say. Let's put it that way.
Of course. And I believe you, a few years ago, moved from the south to the north. And you're now based in Leeds. What have you found your experiences of moving to the north of England like?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. And that's been a fascinating journey, actually. We started thinking about it probably 2017, 2018. And we're a national organisation and we work across England. And somehow the assumption was that we would therefore be based in London. But actually, and we had a great base in London. We had an office at King's Place, which is just next to King's Cross. It's a cultural hub. It's got concert halls. There are orchestras based there. You know, in lots and lots of ways, it was great for us.
Great.
But we didn't do any work in London because we focus our work on communities that have been historically underinvested. So we largely work outside metropolitan centres. We work in rural areas, in towns, market towns, coastal areas, places where there isn't much infrastructure for culture or for orchestral engagement. So I spent the first year of my job actually saying to people, they'd always say, where are you based? I'd say, I'm based in London, but we don't do any work there, which was like the minute you introduced yourself, you had to bring a negative in, which was crazy. And we also began to think, you know, we loved our offices, but they're kind of, they were very, it's a fantastic new building, probably just over 10 years old. Rather beautiful curvy glass exterior and marble inside, high spec, all very quite corporate. And actually our partners are not like that. Our partners are based in local communities. So again, there was a kind of dissonance between the images that we were putting out and what we were saying that we did. So those two things combined to make us think, let's think about moving outside London. There was also a push coming through from Arts Council England, which is the big kind of conduit for government money into the arts. And they wanted to see more money being spent outside London. So it kind of all came together. I took it to the board. We decided we should explore it. And we decided what our kind of deal breakers would be. Obviously, we had to really think carefully about our staff team. And after a range of, you know, quite a lot of research, we picked on Leeds as being a great place for us to settle. And we actually have ended up being based at a place called Duke Studios, which is a really, it's also a cultural hub, but it's totally different. It's not corporate. There's loads of startups there, young people, young professionals working in digital, video, architects, product development, lots of hot desking. So it's a totally different vibe. And it's right in the middle of the new sustainable green area of central Leeds that's being developed over the next couple of years.
Yes.
So it really fits that kind of, I mean, every week I go past another kind of change on my walk into Duke Studios that, you know, a building's started to go up or another one's come down. Apparently Leeds, a councillor told me Leeds has more cranes than any other city in the country at the moment.
I work with with a few construction businesses. They just love to see the cranes everywhere. Cranes are good.
So that's just been, and that in a way typifies what our experience has been in moving to Leeds, because there's such energy.
Yes.
And the conversations I have with people in the north of England are very different in that sense of energy from the conversations I would have in London, because there is a sense that people are frustrated and they're having to find workarounds for all kinds of things, like, don't get me started on the transport system. But there's also a determination. We are not going to let that stop us. If we want something to happen, we will find a way to make that happen. Right. And that's just tremendously, it's energizing and it's exciting, and it gets all the creative juices going. So it's been a great move for us.
Wonderful. Fantastic. And what would you say are your biggest things you've learned about business and about growing businesses, Sarah?
I think for me, it's a kind of combination of risk taking combined with consultation. Kind of, you get the idea, but you have to test that idea out.
Yes.
You can't test it to the point where you think, that's too risky. You've got to kind of poke at your own assumptions and make sure that you haven't got anything still at the back of your mind that in a year's time you think, gosh, I really wish I'd asked that question when I thought of it. And I guess the point that, the element of risk is quite important for us, because we do receive public money and we have to be mindful of that. Yes. And also working in community settings, we don't want to raise expectations and then disappear. We want to know that we can continue that relationship, and we're not going to make things actually worse by starting something off and then saying, I'm really sorry, the money's run out, where we're going. So for me, it's that it's the combination of risk and consultation, and I guess that lies so much behind creative activity as well.
Yes.
And I think there's more similarity between running a business and a creative enterprise than maybe people often think.
That's really, really interesting. It's I remember in my first business, I sort of started to realize when you're growing fast or changing fast, making decisions is really important, because inaction is probably more dangerous than action, even in the wrong direction. And I sort of got to this realization that I had to do enough due diligence to be able to make a reasoned decision, but because we'd never know if it's the right one, I had to make it the right one by my actions moving forward, or our actions moving forward. And I think it's that, as you said, that balance between knowing enough and researching enough, but we have to make a decision. Because everything moves on, doesn't it? Ultimately, the world's moving on.
Absolutely, and that's what leadership, that's what running an organization comes down to. And yes, you have to be prepared to take that on your shoulders. But equally, I've always felt taking your colleagues with you is so important, because
absolutely,
I think we've all experienced organizations where the person at the top says one thing and the people who you then go and talk to about making something happen don't seem to have got the memo. So I think that's, it's important to take people with you and for them to share that enthusiasm that you have. That's what will make it all tick. That's what will bring people in to share the idea with you.
Absolutely. It's that collaboration, isn't it? We need to listen and to the different opinions, but ultimately, probably somebody's got to make a decision, and therefore once it's made, make it right. The team, but if you've done that collaboration, you get ownership of the outcome, even if of the decision, even if it wasn't an individual's first choice, if that makes sense. We get that collaboration.
And it's so important that people feel they've been heard, even though you can't take everybody's ideas on board, but if people feel that you've listened to them and given them a hearing and taken them seriously, that's really important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you're probably aware, Sarah, we're a business coaching organisation, so we do a lot of coaching of people. I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, or life in general.
Yes. That's a really interesting one, actually. I mean, I have worked properly with a couple of mentors. One, somebody called David Pearson, who was not in my area of, cultural activity at all.
Yes.
The thing that I really found fantastic about working with him was that he never, ever gave an answer. He always asked me questions.
Great.
And I try really hard when I'm working with colleagues, and especially younger colleagues. It's so tempting when you see somebody struggling with something to jump in and say, no, this is how you do it. Let's cut to the chase. So I thought that was a really, I mean, apart from the fact that he took me outside my sector and got me to look in from somebody else's perspective, that was
great.
Very important.
Brilliant.
Because you can end up, especially, as your career goes on, you can end up just talking to yourself, can't you?
Yeah.
And talking to the people around you, and not really, and I think we can see a lot around us at the moment. People really need to connect out to understand what's going on around them. Yes. So that was brilliant. And I hope I picked up a bit of his technique around asking the questions, although I know my colleagues might say I'm not always living up to that dream. And then I think there are so many people that I've had connections with, very often creative people who just combine so many different skills in the way that they approach their art and life, that you think, what can I take from that I can feed into my own way of working?
Wonderful. You make the point of asking questions, and it for me, it is a true coaching approach as opposed to a consultant, very valuable person to have, but they are there to give answers, if that makes sense, or do it for you. Whereas a coach is about, I was told when I trained many years ago as a coach that the word education, the root of the word education is the Latin educare, which actually means to draw out, which is interesting when I would suggest traditional education is very much about pushing in knowledge rather and I think it's really key. Now, if it helps, I've worked with one or two people with the idea of asking questions, and I used to play a game with one or two. They're very sort of people that wanted to give answers, and is just play a little game with yourself about how many questions you can ask before you give the answer. And I remember one individual, he struggled for ages to get past two. It was just like but it's an interesting bit of fun. But no,
that's a good one. I'll try that.
It's good. How many? What's your record? I get to 3, but we need. The challenge is often leaders need to get things done. There's an urgency to things, but the more we can involve with questions, the more, because I think the phrase that I love, which is the truth comes out of the other person's mouth. And my job is to help them give their truth. If I say it's true, it's my truth. If you say it's true, then it's yours.
Absolutely. And we all know that experience. As soon as you say something out loud, you think, oh yeah, that you can in a moment solve something that you've been struggling with for quite a long time. That's absolutely true. I think another thing I've reflected on over the past 3 years, with so much happening in this, on this platform online, is how important it is to take time out and actually not be working all the time with people, but in a different environment. So we do much more now into, around away days, or when we do get together in person, because we've largely moved, we're a dispersed team, and we just have very focused moments when we come together.
Yes.
It used to be that we'd do that and kind of try to pretend that we all worked in an office together for a day, which is a complete waste of time because you're missing, you're here in person. There's all these other things you could be doing. So we do try to be much more focused about that and give ourselves a bit of brain space to think and generate ideas.
It's so difficult when we're in demand and things are going, but it's that I love the phrase "slow down to speed up."
Yeah,
and it's the walk, the think, the chat. Because there's often a better way. There's often a better way, and it's just it's still. Speaking of quotes and sayings, are there any? Do you have any favourite quotes or sayings that you fall back on a regular basis?
I don't really. I've never been one for kind of reading manuals. So yeah, I tend not to do that. I tend maybe more to kind of, I don't know, not quite think up my own, but I think so much of my career has been, the learning has been from the experience rather than the theory,
Yep.
So yeah, I tend not to go down that road really.
All good. Some people do, some people don't. It's really interesting that we get a mix of people.
Yeah.
And Sarah, what would you say you've learned about yourself through your career?
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is you just have to take the plunge sometimes. I think, I think that question of confidence and where you really learn and where you grow is when you're in a slightly uncomfortable position. And I think I had no problem with that when I was younger. Then I went through a phase of being really quite cautious and thinking, oh, I'm not really, the imposter syndrome is is an often used phrase. And I think I did have that in the middle of my career. Probably when I was coming into leadership positions and I wasn't entirely, I didn't know if I was ready for that.
Yes.
And actually, that was a point when I wish I had talked more to other people who were in those positions, because I think you tend to think you're the only person that's feeling that way.
Yes.
Now I think it's a much more prevalent notion and people have more understanding of it. But I think at that stage in my career, possibly also, women were not in leadership positions so much. Yes. There's still a load of work that we have to do there, but it was very different really when I was coming into those early leadership roles.
Yeah.
And so you kind of felt you had to be always proving yourself. And maybe that was the thing that sort of pushed you back to thinking of, am I ready for this? And I can't remember who this was actually, but I remember a woman talking about her first chief exec role. Her name will come to me. It wasn't chief exec role, but it was a very senior departmental lead role. And she didn't even understand the name of the title of her role. She thought, what the hell is this about? But she'd been suddenly, pushed up through her ability into this role. And she thought, well, the only thing I can do is ask questions. So people would come in, ask her for a decision, and she'd say, okay, first of all, I want to know what you think.
Great.
Now, she didn't make the decision based on what they thought, but it meant that she got to understand the totality of the issue. And I thought that was rather neat. But I wish I'd talked more to people who had that experience at that time, because I think that level of confidence has probably come a bit late for me. I'm making the most of it now, but I think that can be difficult, especially if you feel there are not so many people like you, whatever that might be, in leadership positions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sort of looking forward a little bit, what does the future look like for Orchestras Live, and what challenges might you face, if any?
Well, the future at the moment looks great, actually. We're in a, you know, relatively comfortable financial position. We've received a significant uplift in our grant from the Arts Council. We're growing the company, so we're bringing on 3 new roles, brand new positions for the company, which will be all about deepening engagement and impact in the areas where we work.
Brilliant.
And we're also we're giving much more focus to the innovation side of what we do and framing that more in business terms. So that's going to be really interesting. Right. We've done a couple of feasibility studies. We're linking that into digital creative work. So, you know, we've got a couple of areas over the next 3 to 5 years that are going to be really developmental. The challenge, I think, is learning to grow, being comfortable with that growth, yes. Not being nervous that, oh, is this taking us away from our, you know, what we should be doing, what we were set up to do 60 years ago type of thing. So learning to grow and embracing those and some of the unexpected consequences, which I am absolutely certain will be just around the corner. But, you know, I think we've got a good track record of absorbing the, you know, shock absorbers that, and I think actually we must, all of us, feel that to an extent about the last 3 years. You know, you when we were chatting, used the word pivot. I mean, we've all done that to an extent, haven't
Absolutely.
we? And we should take confidence from that and really, you know, think, yeah, we are resilient, we are dynamic, we have shown what we can do, we've come out the other side, we've learned stuff, we're doing things differently. So I think if we can be positive about that, it's all to the good.
Completely agree. I mean, I think, you know, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, we've seen three events that together we'll never see the impact. You know, Brexit has had an impact on many businesses, both positively and negatively. COVID, and now the war in Ukraine, and those 3 things have had really significant differences. And getting through those 3 things that came so quickly together, I think, you know, anyone that's got through that both from a business perspective and personally, you know, we demonstrate a level of resilience and ability to change and adapt. Yeah. So I completely agree.
Yeah. I think another thing actually in relation to that is that I think public perception has changed around music and art and what culture and what that means to each of us as individuals, because a lot of people, an awful lot of people, found that was a real salvation actually during times of isolation, and I think it's really brought some new momentum to a movement that was already there about health and well-being and music, and there's been, you know, a lot of dementia choirs and you know, how singing and music can support people living with dementia and their carers and so on. And I think actually that's a real opportunity for my organisation to link in with health and welfare providers. And be the kind of broker, if you like, because how do you know? You might really want to do that in your residential home or across your network of homes, but where do you go to connect with people? How do you know whether they're going to be any good? Yes. It's a bit of a minefield. So I think that's a real opportunity for us in the next few years.
Wonderful. And what would you say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now, Sarah?
I would say go for it. Be sure that you believe in it. Are you, will you put yourself on the line for that idea, because you're going to face some tough questioning, and I think be aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, and always work to other people's strengths. Don't try to force people into your idea of what they should be.
Yeah.
When you're building a team, and for me, teams and colleagues have been so essential to successful projects and successful companies. So really work to people's strengths, and if recognize when if there's not a right fit, find a humane and way of kind of tackling that. But knowing where the power lies and not abusing that is really important as well, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you go look back over the last sort of 8 years, is there anything significantly that you would have done differently, do you think?
I'm not sure that there is significantly. I think the timing of things could have worked out differently, but I think on the whole, maybe because I'm sitting where I am right now, I think even if things didn't go as I saw it according to plan, I would quite like to have moved up to Leeds a little bit earlier and had that launch party, I've got to say, but planning that for the day after lockdown was not great timing. So I would definitely do that differently. Yeah, I can't think of anything major that we should have done very differently.
It's an interesting question, and I, some people say often do things faster or earlier. Most people talk about timeline actually more than change, because I think fundamentally, and it's certainly something I believe is, if you like where you are right now, then any change of decision historically might not get.
That's right. Yeah,
so it's a tricky one in that respect, but yeah, the occasion, some people talk about doing things quicker, faster, or earlier. So that might be right. And finally, Sarah, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do so?
That would be absolutely about confidence, self-belief. Push aside the whatever it is sitting on your shoulder.
Yep.
Oops, sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
That would be it. Just to set aside the voice of doubt, not to a completely reckless degree, but I think you don't want that to be the dominant voice.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that will resonate with many people. I think is overcome those challenges. It's interesting seeing. I've got a teenage girl and one that's now 20, and it's trying to support them through that confidence. You can see that sort of. They're both quite confident kids, but there is environments where you can see that lack of confidence, and I guess. Having gone through that process personally, it's like you just want them to get there to some extent.
You really do. But, it's such a tough one, isn't it? Because so much of it is down to personal experience, and I do think social media makes it a whole lot harder for this than it was for me.
Really agree.
Being 18 now is
Yes. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. It's been really fascinating, and if anyone listening or watching would like to get in touch with you or Orchestras Live, what would be the best way to do that?
Just look on our website and you'll see contact details. It's www.orchestraslive.org.uk. So that's
lovely.
To us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It'd be great to maybe come back in 12 months and just see what the next developments. Obviously, you're growing and employing people, so hopefully we could do that. And again, once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.